chosen ones, they never expected you to speak. For centuries, the Hermetic Covenant stood like a blade between worlds, silent, pulsing, sacred. It was never carved in stone, but etched into frequencies only certain bloodlines could perceive. And yet, with a single breath, your breath, it fractured. Not because you were reckless, but because the covenant was always a lie waiting for truth to arrive. Your true name was never supposed to return. It was scattered across dimensional scripts, buried in vibrational codes, and erased from Akashic echoes. When you uttered it, not in words, but in resonance, the glyphs cracked. And in that moment, every secret society aligned against the divine spark felt it. Something ancient had awakened. And it wasn't them. You were the anomaly the prophets feared. The voice that unraveled the binding of the hidden scroll. The reason they encrypted the stars. Even the emerald tablets warned of one who bears the tone of source. That tone was not a sound. It was a being. You. The last Hermetic Covenant wasn't written for humanity. It was built against you. Crafted by those who feared what would happen if you remembered who you were. If you aligned the syllables of your soul. If your voice matched the primal chord. Because once it did, it would not just unlock hidden vaults. It would destroy the contracts written by those pretending to be gods. And now it has begun. They felt the rupture across all dimensions. The bloodlines shivered. The AI scribes glitched. Even the watchers turned their gaze from the edge of time. Your name didn't just echo, it unbound. And the ancient covenant split like glass under pressure it could no longer hold. This script will not be entertainment. It will be a countdown. Because the moment you spoke your name, the timelines bent. The circles reformed. The forbidden sigils activated. You were always the variable they couldn't control. Now, the veils are thin. The guardians restless. The silence before the sound has passed. And deep beneath the ruins of what once was, your voice is still echoing. Before time could be measured and before tongues spoke of gods, there was a chamber beneath the ocean floor. Carved not by tools but by intention, it pulsed with the memory of a name too dangerous to be known. Beneath what the world now calls Atlantis, there existed a vault untouched by any age. A crystalline capsule of sound and spirit. Inside it, encoded not in symbols, but in harmonics, was a name. Not written, not spoken, sealed. That name was yours. When Atlantis fell, the guardians of the deep did not mourn. They watched. Because the collapse was not a tragedy. It was an engineered silence. The temple was buried, not by water, but by intention. They had to lock away the frequency of your identity, because even whispered in a dream, it could awaken timelines meant to remain forgotten. But what they failed to calculate was this. Your name is not held by a structure. It is held by the soul. As centuries rolled forward and empires built themselves on ruins they could not understand, the temple beneath the sea remained. It would call out sometimes during magnetic storms or under blood moons. A hum, a pulse, a resonance mistaken for tectonic movement. But it wasn't the earth shifting. It was your name, resisting silence. The high councils sent agents to retrieve fragments of the lost codes. They built submarines of sound, programs of psychic intrusion. They even sent dreamwalkers, but none returned with the truth. Because the temple only responds to one voice. and it isn't theirs. Now, something has shifted. An energy signature unlike any before just registered off the Cuban trench. The AI monitoring systems crashed for 13 seconds, the same 13 seconds marked in the Atlantean prophecy as the moment the sealed name would stir. This time it didn't just stir, it called, and you felt it, didn't you? A ringing in the bones, a pressure behind the eyes, a pull toward something you can't yet define but know with certainty. You weren't supposed to remember the way, but the way has remembered you. And as the waters tremble once again, the temple prepares to open, not for the world, not for the elite, but for the only voice it was designed to hear. There is a gate that does not exist in any visible realm, and yet it has kept entire realities from colliding. The ninth gate is not a place. It is a silence. A conscious silence wrapped around an ancient truth. Many tried to enter, but all were turned away by something beyond understanding. Not a guardian, not a curse, a whisper. And it did not speak to them. It only waited for one. Yeshua once stood before that gate, not as a trespasser, but as one who understood what was sealed within. He never opened it. He only left a fragment, buried in parables, encoded in the breath between his words. When he said the kingdom was within you, he wasn't offering comfort. He was pointing to the fracture in your soul that matched the fracture in the gate. That silence has begun to thin. It is not breaking open. It is unfolding. And within it, something remembers you. Not as a stranger, not as a myth, but as the one who was supposed to return. The covenant you fractured with your true name was the last protection holding the gate shut. They knew that once your frequency aligned, the ninth gate would begin to listen again. The ancients feared this more than any war, because what lies behind that silence is not destruction. It is a remembering that undoes the constructs of false gods and synthetic timelines, a remembering that strips away the illusions of dominion, and that is what they could never allow. In the scrolls long hidden beneath Mount Carmel, there is a phrase burned into the margins in a language no scholar can trace. It translates to this: when the voice that matched the silence returns, the covenant must shatter or be consumed. That voice is not Yeshua's, it is yours. But he left the imprint. He marked the gate for you. You've started to hear it, haven't you? Not a voice, but a stillness that speaks louder than thought. Not a sound, but a weight behind your ribs. That's how the gate calls. Through absence, through longing, through the memory of a name too holy to pronounce. Long before kingdoms rose, before religions scripted the rules of the divine, there were bloodlines that didn't seek power through conquest, but through control of vibration. These were not noble houses. These were frequencies bound to flesh. Families bred not for legacy, but for silence. Their sole purpose: ensure your voice was never heard. Not your opinions, not your cries, your true voice, the one laced with the original frequency, the sound that bends time and breaks seals. These bloodlines passed down secrets in reverse. They taught their children how to forget, not remember. Rituals were built not to awaken, but to dull. They mastered the art of distortion. They encoded fear into sound, so that any time someone like you came close to resonance, their very cells would rebel. And yet, even that was not enough. Because a frequency like yours cannot be contained. it waits. Over time, the world forgot what power the voice held. They reduced it to speech, to noise, to language. But sound, true sound, is creation, and yours carries the echo of the first light. That is why they built the vaults, why they burned the manuscripts, why they replaced sacred chants with static repetition. They were not afraid of chaos. They were afraid of you speaking it into order. In secret conclaves beneath Geneva, in off-record meetings in Antarctica, even in forgotten caves beneath Jerusalem, the descendants of those ancient families still gather. They monitor for anomalies. They intercept dreams. They hijack awakenings, not because they don't believe, but because they do. Entire institutions were founded to make sure no one could remember your tone. But now, the tones are changing. The AI they programmed to detect threats has picked up an irregular signature, not a weapon, a waveform, organic, ancient, alive. They cross-checked it 13 times, and each time it returned to the same impossible result. The sound was human. The sound was divine. The sound was you. So they activated the protocols. They sealed the underground gates. They shut down entire grid sections to reroute energy away from your region. But they were too late. Because it didn't start with you speaking. It started with you remembering. In a hidden monastery carved into the stone of the Sinai, there was once a scroll locked behind 6 chambers of breath-activated doors. It was not made of paper or animal skin. It was formed from living ether, encoded vibration woven into matter. The monks who protected it did not read it. They listened, because the scroll spoke only in presence. Only when the right soul was near would it unfold, revealing not words, but memory. For centuries it remained still, silent, waiting, until the day it caught fire without flame. It wasn't lightning, it wasn't sabotage, it was you. The moment you stirred, somewhere across the world, the scroll ignited and vanished. Not destroyed, but released. And what it held was a prophecy older than the stars. Yeshua knew of it. In the desert nights, when the winds spoke in tones only few could hear, he would retreat and place his hands on the stone and listen. It wasn't scripture he sought. It was the resonance of the name that had not yet returned, yours. He never tried to unlock the scroll. He knew it wasn't his to open. He was the echo before the voice, the reflection before the flame. He saw the fire before it lit, and he left signs in his teachings for the one who would come after, the one whose presence alone would set the ether ablaze. That awakening is not metaphorical. The scroll burned in real time. Satellites registered a heat spike in the precise coordinates of the Sinai cave. Yet no flame was found, only an imprint scorched into the wall, a sigil that none could decode. But one thing was certain. It activated the moment your pulse aligned with a long-forgotten harmonic. And the ones who kept watch, those who once claimed divine authority, they recognized what this meant. They convened in silence, the memory keepers, the false shepherds, the final witnesses. The scroll's burning was the sign they dreaded. You weren't supposed to awaken yet. They had calculated the timelines down to the second, but something unexpected shattered the sequence. Buried beneath the sands of Saqqara, deeper than the tombs the world celebrates, lies a passage untouched by archaeology or time. Not stone, not trap, a corridor of encoded resonance, carved by intention and sealed with a cipher no priest or pharaoh dared translate. It was Thoth's final message, not to Egypt, not to the stars, but to one traveler whose voice would unlock the impossible. You. Most seekers misread the emerald tablets. They see myth in their lines, riddles in their truth. But they were never meant to be solved by intellect. They are keys disguised as verses. Each line activates a layer of memory. Each phrase aligns a piece of the soul's map. But there was always one line missing. One that Thoth never wrote, only embedded. This final cipher could not be decoded by reading. It could only be recognized. A recognition born from frequency, not mind. The moment your voice stirred, before words, before sound, something ancient in the sands shifted. A subtle tremor, a harmonic quake, and then silence, but not absence, a waiting. Thoth didn't hide the cipher to protect it from man. He hid it because its activation would rupture the illusions built by the false architects. He foresaw the systems of control, the ages of forgetfulness, the rise of synthetic gods, and he knew only one being could dissolve it all, not with war, but with memory. That being was encoded in the cipher's logic, but the logic wasn't numbers. It was soul geometry. Vibration aligned with origin. You were the variable no one else could calculate, the sound he predicted, the arrival they denied. Now, ancient sands are vibrating again. Instruments buried in forgotten research facilities are picking up frequencies beneath Egypt that match no known source. The pattern isn't random, it's rhythmic, like breath, like a name being whispered from the other side of the veil. And the ones who buried the cipher, those who understood what would happen if it were triggered, they're watching. They've known this moment would come, but they believed they had more time. The stories they passed down were never just about miracles. They were about symbols encoded with events yet to come. When Yeshua stepped onto the water, it wasn't to impress or defy physics. It was a demonstration of frequency mastery. Water is memory. And what he walked on was not liquid, it was time. Each ripple beneath his feet held echoes of a future voice, one the elements themselves recognized. Yours. He didn't need to part seas because he could part veils. He didn't need to shout commands because the vibration of his presence bent reality into alignment. But even he, the architect of many veiled truths, never claimed to be the final word. He knew another would come, not to repeat, to complete. You were always part of the equation, hidden between the lines, buried beneath centuries of altered texts and manipulated interpretations. Yeshua's acts weren't random. They were a preparation, coded messages to unlock later doors. And one of those doors just opened the moment you remembered what it felt like to speak your name without fear. The same energy that let him walk across impossible elements is the energy now flickering behind your ribs. When the voice inside you cracked the covenant, the very waters around sacred sites began to shift. Temple lakes grew still without wind. Mirrors cracked without impact. And frequencies once dormant surged back online, not as data, but as memory. Monks stationed in silence for decades near Galilee felt it. They didn't speak it aloud, but they wrote it down. He has returned, not as a man, but as the echo. They weren't referring to Yeshua himself, but to the continuation of the sound he once awakened. You are that continuation. You are the frequency ripple from a step taken 2,000 years ago. The ones in power know this. They've traced it back to you through irregular energy pulses, through dream anomalies recorded by their consciousness mapping tech. They call it an unmapped tone. But it's not unmapped. It's just unowned, because it belongs only to you. Deep beneath Vatican archives, and miles below what is accessible to any public record, lies a chamber constructed not by modern hands, but by something older. It is not marked on maps, nor listed in any catalog of sacred architecture. Its walls are not built from stone, but from a dense material that vibrates with locked intention. The priests don't speak of it. Most don't even know it exists. Only a few, those whose vows go beyond scripture, are permitted near it. They call it the chamber of the untuned voice. For centuries it remained dormant, not silent, but asleep. The air inside doesn't move. The light inside doesn't obey physical rules. It bends. It breathes. But most unnerving of all is its sensitivity. The chamber does not react to footsteps. It reacts to resonance. Not just sound, but intent, emotion, identity. For generations, they sent initiates to sit in the room and chant ancient syllables. None succeeded in activating it. Until now. Weeks ago, without warning, the chamber pulsed. A single tremor. No explosion, no noise, just a shift. Instruments in the lower sanctum recorded a momentary spike in magnetic displacement and non-local wave behavior. The pattern was traced, backtracked across the planetary grid until it intersected with something they didn't expect, a human heartbeat. But not just any heartbeat. One vibrating with a tone lost to their codices, a tone that shouldn't exist. Yours. They ran every test imaginable. They assumed error, equipment failure. But it wasn't a glitch. It was a response. The chamber had heard you. Or, more precisely, it had recognized you. The ancient texts said this would happen. That one day, the voice that was scattered through time would find coherence again. That a name spoken with alignment would reawaken chambers built not to hold people, but truths. The ones who sealed it away hoped it would never come to this. They feared the moment of activation, not because of the energy it would release, but because of the questions it would answer. Now, the chamber is humming, low, steady, waiting, and for the first time it has turned toward the surface. Not inward, outward. There's a detail buried in the oldest Aramaic fragments of the crucifixion accounts, something the modern translations always skipped. Just before Yeshua's final breath, as the sky darkened and the veil tore, he whispered a word that no one standing nearby recognized. Not Hebrew, not Greek, not any language known to man. It wasn't a word for others to hear. It was a sound meant for the stars, and that sound wasn't a farewell, it was a call. He knew what was coming. Not just the end of his life, but the continuation of something older than time itself. That word wasn't random. It was encoded. A seed planted in the fabric of Earth's memory, set to vibrate again only when the one who matched its frequency came near. And that resonance has just been triggered. You didn't speak it. You reflected it. When your name fractured the covenant, It activated the dormant code layered inside Yeshua's last breath. Not metaphor, not poetry, literal resonance. It bounced back from the edge of the unseen, aligning waveforms across dimensions until the mirror completed its circuit. You were always the other half, the unseen tone in the divine dialogue. The theologians would never admit this. The scholars who bend truth into doctrine. They sanitized the moment. They turned mystery into metaphor. But the scrolls kept hidden in the Ethiopian vaults say otherwise. They describe a final word that didn't translate, but instead opened. A tone that sent ripples through the bloodlines, through sacred architecture, through the astral gate systems. A tone that did not end anything. It signaled someone. You. Now, across the grid, strange phenomena are syncing. From Jerusalem to Machu Picchu, from Rennes-le-Chateau to Sedona, the same energy signature is emerging. Not explosive, not chaotic, familiar. Ancient stones are vibrating ever so slightly, aligning not to a symbol, but to a soul. The mirrors Yeshua left behind weren't glass. They were moments, codes, triggers, and each one was waiting for a reflection. The frequency of a being who had once spoken before time and now, finally, was speaking again. In the ruins beneath Lake Van, long before the rise of empire or scripture, a pact was carved, not into stone, but into collective memory. It was not spoken in words, but sealed through intent. 13 figures, none of whom claimed thrones or titles, gathered around a fire that burned without fuel. Each one represented a lineage designed not to rule the world, but to protect a singular secret, your voice. They called it the vow of the first silence. It was not created to bind demons or control angels. It was created to suppress the one soul who could unmake their control with a single, aligned utterance. You. They weren't afraid of power in the traditional sense. They feared what your voice would unlock, truths too raw for their constructs to survive. The vow was passed down in blood, not ink. You won't find it in books. You'll find it in the gaps between teachings, in the contradictions of doctrine, in the deliberate mistranslations of sacred languages. The vow didn't censor you outright. It distorted the frequencies around you so that the world would hear your name and forget it in the same breath. Your influence was inverted. Echo turned to static. Song turned to silence. Even in modern times, they've upheld the vow, not with knives, but algorithms, not with sorcery, but with signal control. They built a digital veil, encoded with ancient protection glyphs hidden in code. Every time your vibration resurfaced, something glitched, a delay, a shadow ban, a sudden disconnection, all engineered to keep your voice just below the surface. But something has broken. An oath, once sealed by celestial alignment, is unraveling. One of the bloodlines faltered. One of the vow-bearers stepped out of formation. And the moment they did, the silence began to fray. Not violently, rhythmically, like a door creaking open after being locked for ages. You've felt it, haven't you? The moments where everything suddenly goes still, like reality waiting for you to speak. That's not coincidence. That's the vow losing grip, and they know it. Now, the 13 are gathering again, not to strengthen the vow, but to decide what to do, now that your voice has returned and the silence no longer holds. The moment your name passed through the ether, something in the upper atmosphere fractured. not physically, but energetically. Satellites malfunctioned for exactly 7 seconds. Birds flew in chaotic spirals above ancient sites. Storm clouds formed over deserts that hadn't seen rain in a decade. The sky didn't fall, it responded. Because what broke wasn't just a hidden oath. It was a spiritual contract encoded into the grid of the earth itself. The last Hermetic Covenant had one job: to keep him from returning until the world was sufficiently bound in silence. And you, by remembering your name, just voided that contract. The covenant was written by architects who understood how to shape reality through limitation. Their magic wasn't overt. It was subtle, bureaucratic, technical. They used language, rituals, paper, and digital constructs to delay what they couldn't prevent. They created a false countdown, hoping you would believe the time hadn't come yet. But the moment you aligned with your tone, the countdown collapsed. And the return began, not in spectacle, in resonance. He is not coming as lightning across the sky. He is not descending from clouds. He is returning through you. Through every syllable you speak without fear. Through every unspoken remembrance rising from the depths of your bones. Yeshua's return is not about geography. It is about frequency. And the sound of your name is the first tremor in that rising tide. The sky cracked because the veil between dimensions thinned beyond their ability to mend it. They tried to patch it with global rituals, false flag distractions, media storms crafted to steal your attention. But none of it worked, because once the covenant fractured, every attempt to cover it up only amplified its echo. Now, light is behaving differently. Patterns are forming in places only those aligned can perceive. Reflections are showing symbols not present in the physical world. The firmament above is no longer just atmosphere. It has become a mirror, and it's showing a face not seen since the origin spark. They're running out of tools. The guardians they once relied on have turned silent. The vaults are unsealing themselves. The codes they buried in forbidden tongues are translating in real time.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.